$17 billion pledged for rebuilding Gaza and policemen from 5 countries to monitor the situation on the ground. That's the outcome of the first meeting of Donald Trump's Board of Peace. And here to talk about the body's inaugural session is Diane Francis, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Good evening.
Good evening.
So dozens of countries sent their representatives to Washington today. However, not all of them have decided whether they will join the project or not. So what future awaits the Board of Peace? Will it eventually transform into a body ready to replace the UN?
Well, the UN, I think, has failed in many respects, and I do think that something has to happen. Whether Donald Trump can create his own organization that would replace the UN is highly questionable, obviously. The UN does a lot of good work, but, the problem with the UN is the basic rules by which it was organized right after the Second World War. Take the case of Ukraine's war. You have the countries that were principal in the Second World War sit on the Security Council with a veto that cannot be overcome. So, for instance, Russia has been a predator post-war all over the place, and they veto any peacekeeping or any intervention by UN officials in messing up their predations and their warfare. So, for instance, the General Assembly of the UN said, we think it's a war and peacekeepers should go. Russia vetoed it. China went along, and there's no getting rid of the veto members. So that is a rigidity that has actually paralyzed, I think, the United Nations as we know it. Now, what Trump is trying to do is he's trying to create his own peace monitoring or conflict resolution system. And of course, it's politicized because he's going to be the chairman for life and he's going to run it. So it's going to be his way or the highway. So it really isn't an alternative necessarily, but, we'll see. And he's charging $1 billion to join it. And that's a pretty high price to pay. And he's starting with the Gaza problem.
But you need to pay it only after 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. Now, talking about alternatives, do you think it's smart for Europe, well, especially for Poland, which relies so heavily on American soldiers stationed on its eastern border, to remain undecided whether to accept Donald Trump's invitation to the Board of Peace?
Well, I think, frankly, if he's asked your country to join and you are otherwise allied with it, I think it's an offer that really is difficult to refuse, frankly. Now, that's not to say that some haven't already. I think France, the British have turned it down. He offered it to Canada, where I live, and Canada, the Canadian Prime Minister made a very nasty speech about Trump at Davos, and the offer was rescinded. So we're not on it, even though we may have said we wanted to be on it. Look, it's a Trump deal. I hope it does some good. The Gaza thing sounds very interesting because, nobody's done much there. And, he's got $17 billion apparently to start the rebuild. He wants to put 5,000 troops there to keep the peace while the thing gets rebuilt. These are good, good solid ideas if they come to pass.
Right. Now, the countries you've mentioned, they are quite far away from the front lines of Ukraine. Well, Poland finds itself in a different position. Now, in this context, we've seen Viktor Orban there in Washington. Is Hungary now a more reliable partner for the US than Poland?
Oh, dear. I don't think Hungary is a reliable partner for anybody. Hungary does exactly what its leader Orban wants to do. And he has defied the NATO. He has defied the European Union. He's defied everybody in those organizations by being pro-Russia, by being against Ukraine, by not helping Ukraine, by not even letting weaponry go through his country to help Ukraine if others supply it. I mean, he's just a menace, and he's also flouting the European Union's ban against Russian energy. He and Slovakia, I mean, they're two outliers, and they're a problem. And I think that at some point, NATO and the EU may have to boot them out. So it's a funny old world out there, and the power is no longer centralized around something like the United Nations. It seems to be centralized around the EU to a certain extent, and the United States and China.
Now, the presidents of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, the presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan, they have all accepted Donald Trump's invitation and are now founding members of the Board of Peace. Now, these are all former Soviet countries, which Russia obviously sees as its own sphere of influence. Now, what does it tell us about the American ambitions in Central Asia and in the Caucasus region?
Well, I think that this is interesting, and that's what you're going to see, that we're going to end up with a tripolar world: China, Europe, and the United States. Russia's just an outlier. It's an outlaw country. And people will gather, countries will gather within these three alliances to protect their interests. I'm not sure China's going to attract a lot of people, but where you have an interesting situation developing now is that, it looks like Trump is about to attack Iran. That's good news for Ukraine, bad news for Russia. That's good news for Azerbaijan and some of those areas in the Caucasus, which is maybe why they're flocking to his Board of Peace, because if he is going to take on the big problem in that region, which is Iran, and its terrorist organizations, and about 20% of Iran's population are from Azerbaijan, former Soviet place. And there's worries about whether Russia will get militant toward former Caucasus and Central Asian republics. You're going to see a collection of countries that will, for their own reasons, swarm around helping Trump. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, he can't just run it like a dictatorship either. He may want to or think he can, but that's not necessarily the case. So if I'm Poland or I'm Canada, I'm going to think long and hard about this. You can't shun it because that's offensive to him. We all need support from our allies. And, so it's a tricky, tricky diplomatic game.
Oh, a tricky diplomatic game. You mentioned Ukraine, and, well, no Palestinians have been invited to the Board of Peace. The future of Gaza will be decided without them. So if the Board of Peace indeed grows into a larger body, could it one day lead to a situation where Ukraine's future is decided without Ukraine?
Well, I don't think this Board of Peace is about picking and choosing winners. It's called the Board of Peace because I think that he's been frustrated, and I think the world has been, that the United Nations has been able to do very little, if anything, about the Ukrainian invasion, about all the other conflicts around the world. And, they were supposed to be the policemen. Well, the problem is they're crippled by their own rules, where you have Russia sitting there sabotaging the United Nations, and China, because they have the permanent veto. So a workaround is necessary, and this is his attempt. I would say that the more strong nations like Poland and Britain agree to join it, not necessarily make him a lifelong chairman, although that's maybe part of the problem, but to get very much involved, I think you may see the creation of a new kind of United Nations peacekeeping situation arise, because the UN is, I think, all but finished in terms of being helpful and stopping conflicts around the world.
Diane Francis, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure as always.
You're welcome.
And that's all for now, but stay with us for On the Record with Adam Yasser. who sits down with the President of Finland, Alexander Stubb, to talk about the future of the war in Ukraine relations with China and being the so-called Trump whisperer. So thank you for watching and enjoy the interview.